Welcome back to Worn Out Racing. It's another episode on the PEX, the stripped out Cinquecento, and in today's episode we are going to finally get cracking on the engine because I've now got all of the parts I need for it, essentially just to refresh it. Alright, we haven't got spark plugs and stuff, but oil filters and seals and gaskets and everything like that. I just need to get it up on the engine stand so I can flip it, take the sump off, check all that, start putting the crank seals and stuff on, and then I need to buy a special tool to lock the cam in place so I can do the timing belt. But once this is all bolted back together, manifold, inlet manifold, then this can be all wheeled over onto the gearbox, which will probably be on a later episode. The other thing I'm going to be doing, which I guess is also engine related, and I can't bring myself to open the bonnet because every time I do I just stare at it in disbelief about how much work I've got ahead of me, is to paint the engine bay. It's not going to be amazing. We're just going to smooth it out a little bit more, sand it, make sure there's no rust in any horrible places. Then it's going to be basically either white or satin black. That's it. What that does mean is by the end of this episode, if all being well, the engine should be basically put back together. The engine bay will be painted. That means then in the next episode after that, I guess, or maybe a couple more, who knows, I can slot the engine and gearbox into the car, and that's quite a big deal because not only then do I have loads of space, but that's a big job. I can start pushing all the wiring through, bolting the radiator on, that's parts off the floor as well, getting all of those things that just kicking around my garage going to get damaged eventually, and getting them on the car itself. And I can feel a little bit better, and that buyer's remorse can slowly start to fade away. So stick with me while we get cracking on some engine stuff and I start learning some things about 16 valves, because I know nothing. Now sometimes you need a little bit of thought to make sure you're doing everything in the right order so you don't end up taking everything off twice. Now actually I've realised I don't need to take this sump off to do the oil seal. That's only if you're actually taking the whole housing out, and you don't need to do that. So the seal we're talking about here is just this one that goes around the outside of the actual crank itself, and all that literally does is just keeps the oil so it can rotate, but obviously not spill oil out of there. Now all you need to do is get a little hooked thing like a tiny screwdriver or whatever you need, pluck that out, get the new one, dip it in some oil and then put it on there and then lightly tap it in, which I'll show you me doing anyway. This sump definitely looks like it's had better days, so hopefully that one spare one I've got can go on here instead and get all this grime cleared off. But either way, we'll do this one first. We can't do the one on the other side until the timing belt's done, so we'll do that one later on. Now it goes without saying, don't go crazy here, because if you end up scratching or damaging all around here, you're going to cause yourself problems. Normally what I do, little tip, if you haven't got a hook tool, use a tiny little screwdriver. I usually just make a tiny little hole just in there, in that outer ring. Then I put a tea towel like this, and I do that, and then I basically just slowly, when I say slowly, just make your way around, and eventually you'll be able to lever it out. Now you can't quite see it, but I've already started getting it there. So basically I'll just move around to here and then move around to here, just kind of lever it out a little bit at a time. Or you could just go buy some hook tools and save yourself the hassle, but it works for me anyway. There we go. Done. Like I said, there is no chance you're ever going to reuse one of these, so throw it away. But I say I'll just make sure it's all nice and clean inside here now, just so it's got a nice clean surface to go back into. And if you are wondering why I'm doing this now, because there's no reason to, essentially this one doesn't show any signs of having failed. You have to think that normally there would be a flywheel, a clutch, a gearbox, all kinds of things on top of this, and having had one of these leak on my turbo one before, I can tell you now, knowing that you have to take all that stuff off to replace it sucks. So the fact that one of these should, in theory, last tens and maybe 100,000 miles before it gives you any problems, why not, for the sake of, I think it was £4, throw one on there. So we're just gonna, I've already cleaned up the surface in there, so the actual where it's going to be bolting on, going in, is nice and clean, so it won't catch on anything. You haven't got to go mental here, it's just so that you've got something to help it slot in. And remember, it goes flat way out and that way in. If you're never sure, just think about how you took off the old ones. Obviously this one was facing out and that bit was facing on the inside. I'm just going to place that like this, and then lightly now it doesn't hurt to sit here tapping this for a little while, because just imagine if you did it wrong and it leaked anyway. I haven't got to worry about damaging anything because this is rubber. And just run your fingers round and just make sure that nowhere on there is there a little lip. Because there's a lip, you haven't put it on properly. Perfect. Oh, we've hit a little bit of a roadblock now because I've managed to modify the engine stand. So I just cut that little bit off and I've just made them all the same length. So if I need to, I could put little spaces on there for different engines. I've got it bolted on. This engine weighs a little bit more than some of the engines I lift. And I'll be honest with you, I can lift it. I could lift it. They're about 70 kg. I could lift that. But it's not worth blowing my back out for it. Like if I had my life depended on it, yes, absolutely, I could tip this up. Because basically I'll flip the camera and I'll show you how I normally do it. Now just know I don't in any way recommend you do it this way necessarily, but this is how I've usually done it in the past, is I'll bolt it on like this, at an angle, and I'll stick the locking pin in there so the engine doesn't like fling around too much. And I'll go that side and I'll go down my legs, I'll basically squat it and then just tip it up. Once you get to about, I don't know, 2 foot off the floor, it's kind of pivoting on this wheel then, which is why I've put this on there to stop it sliding, and then just kind of slowly tip it over. And I've done it with the 899s before, but either way, when I've tried to lift it, it just feels a lot heavier than I remember. And I'll be honest with you, I'm probably not quite as strong as I used to be. I used to go to the gym a lot more. I used to work out at home and stuff, but I hurt my back a few months ago and I've not worked out at home anywhere near as much as possible. So maybe I'm just getting weak. But either way, I'm going to wait for my mate Chris or other friend to unwittingly come over and then we'll lift it up and do it. So in the meantime, while I'm waiting for that to happen, we're going to crack on and get a few other little bits sorted that are going to be bolting onto this engine because why not? You may as well get cracking on with that. And that is going to be quickly painting these up. We're not going to spend a lot of time doing this bit because let's face it, we're never going to see them. So I'm going to fire this up with my new wire wheel on there. Just get as much of the loose stuff off as I can because this is straight to rust hammerite paint I'm going to be using. It's quite expensive, but it is really good for this. Then I'm just going to degrease it, give all those a spray, then we can bolt those on, which admittedly it's going to make the engine a little bit heavier, but it might make it a bit easier to lift it if I've got some engine brackets on it. And this, and as you can probably already see, these areas here are already starting to come clean because for whatever reason, I don't know what paint he's used on this. I don't know whether it just wasn't clean. I don't know. It's just, I have no idea. But you can see it is oxidizing terribly underneath, which aluminium is inclined to do if it's not protected very well. And actually, even just with a screwdriver, I'm just hitting this and it's just coming off. So hopefully I can actually get most of this red paint off just scraping it. Because honestly, if I got a screwdriver around here, we can try it with. There we go. Look how satisfying that is. Now, I'm not going to spend forever doing it, but there's no point trying to paint this if it's just going to all flake off like that. So probably what I'll do is I'll scrape some off and then I'm going to tape all these holes up, and anywhere that I obviously don't want water to go in, I might do a very light misting of some kind of paint stripper. I don't know what yet, and then just give it a quick jet wash and then it'll be done then. Either I'll paint it or I won't. It might go to black, it might end up being silver, but we'll do this. I mean, he's even painted the rubber stopper thing that goes on there, so we might try and get that off as well. But yep, we might as well do that until we tip the engine up. Now there's probably some fairly dodgy camera angles there, but you get the point. I'm not actually showing you how to paint these. I'm just showing you that this is what we're doing as part of the process. Just try to get it as clean as possible. Now the nice thing about hammerite paint, it is straight to rust paint. So you can obviously paint it straight to it and it treats the rust, seals it all in and stuff. But that's no good if the paint's all flaking off and it's covered in grease. So I use some nail varnish remover. So done all that. I'll get my little frame set up. We'll get it all hooked on the little hooks just through the bolt holes. Give it a real quick couple of coats. If anything, when you see these at the end, I'd rather you go, you don't really think anything of it, because that's the whole point. I don't want you to think anything of them. I don't want you to see them and think, wow, they're really red. I just want you to ignore them completely, because they're going to be bolted to the bottom of the car. And this one especially, is probably going to get a bit of a hard time, because that's the back gearbox mount. When you run these low, that tends to be the one that hits the floor. So I'm going to grab my can, give it a shake, spray these up. My mate Shaden was not wrong. This stuff, as good as it is, because I'm used to the cans, which is super thick, this comes out really thin. So I think if you're going for a really nice finish, you're going to have to take this really steady, just really light coats, plenty of time between, maybe get the heat gun and stuff on it. But because I don't care really, this just needs to look black and not look weird, then I'm just going to go through this one little quick colour. I think that's probably enough for now. I might give that half an hour and give it one last quick breeze over, because chances are there's going to be some bits under here that I'm going to have missed, but we won't worry about that too much. Now, as you can probably tell from the slightly moody lighting, it's getting a little bit later now, so I'm probably going to leave these out drying, because if it rains in the next couple of hours, hopefully not, these should be dry anyway, so it shouldn't make any difference. And then we'll pick it up where we left off tomorrow when I come back, and then we'll do some probably the gearbox then. Sounds good. Let's do that, Ben. And here we go. We've got one right hand side engine mount with bracket. Don't worry about this bit of red here because you won't see it, and it's got red on the actual polyurethane thing, but don't worry about that. We have one gearbox mount, happy days, and we have one main front engine mount, happy days. Now, I don't know about you, is it perfect? Nope. But does it look slightly more factory? Yes. So as you can see here, these nice poly bushes here, we should do a nice trick, keep my engine and gearbox nice and stable. But if it ends up being too vibraty, even that's not really a word, or too loud, then I may switch maybe some of these for rubber ones. Who knows? Right. So that's a not very important but much needed job done. We're going to be moving on to the gearbox in just a second. But my friendly local Amazon driver has been round and he's dropped off my new cam locking tool, which I do need to do the timing belt on a 16 valve. It's a little bit more tricky than doing it on an 8 valve engine, annoyingly, but I've got the tool now and hopefully that's £15 well spent. And my good mate Matt, and he is a good mate, I've known him a really long time. I don't think he's ever seen one of these episodes, but I'm going to thank him anyway. He's lent me this, which for any of you who don't know, it's basically like a pulley locking tool. So the basic main cam pulley, this kind of goes through the teeth of it. So when you try and undo the bolt, it doesn't just turn the pulley. You can hold this and it holds it in place, because you also need to do that to get the belt back on it. So all I need now is someone to help me move the engine onto the engine stand, but it's proven a little bit difficult at the moment because my beefy mate Rich has pulled his back at the gym, so he can't do it. He's out of action for a little bit. My more so or equally beefy mate Chris, who would probably deadlift one of these with his left foot, is also extremely busy and he hasn't had time to pop over yet. So I don't know, so it's definitely holding me up a little bit, but either way, we'll crack on with the gearbox, get that cleaned up and painted, and that's one more thing then I can put in my pile of to be fitted to the car when it's ready, and then we can work out what bolts and stuff we're missing as we go along. So I'm going to grab a screwdriver, whatever kind of wire brush attachment I'm going to do. I probably won't show you this until it's actually done. I'm going to sand it all back, and then I'll decide whether I'm going to paint it black or silver or whatever, and we'll pop that to one side, and that's one more bit in the pile. So I'm not going to enjoy this one very much, I don't think. Satisfying maybe, but it's not going to be a fun job. Had a change of plan, but I'm really happy how it's gone, so I'm going to show you what I've done. Oh yeah. So in the end, the way that it was going, I knew I was never going to get a good finish on it, so I've decided to actually use some existing paint that I had, and I've got some black crinkle paint. I haven't put a lot of layers on it. I don't want it causing problems with like the threads and stuff, even I might have to clean some of the threads on some of the bolts, but otherwise it is currently drying, and I'm hoping once it is dry it has just a very slightly textured finish and we should be in business. Well, I think that's going to look pretty mint, and I'm really happy with my decision to do it with crinkle black, assuming that it dries okay, nothing weird happens when it's reacting. We'll go out and take that look in a minute, tip it all up the right way and just make sure everything's okay and I haven't missed loads of red bits. But the other good news is my good friend Matt, who I mentioned before, who's lent me the tool, I've managed to rope him into coming over this weekend to tip the engine stand up. So finally the engine will be up on the engine stand and we can get cracking with arguably much more important jobs than painting red things black. So next up, timing belt, crank seals, and maybe just a bit of degreasing and then maybe a tiny little bit of painting, because you know I love to paint stuff. So either way, when you see me in a little bit, that engine stand will be up the right way and I will be cracking on. I just realised I went on and filmed a whole other segment to the episode and I didn't actually show you how it finished up. Obviously these are still covered in tape at the moment, but this is it. I've got the engine brackets basically mounted on. and everything else all peeled off. I think you'll agree, hopefully at least, it's a little shiny in places where the crinkle obviously must have went on, probably straight onto metal rather than onto paint and stuff like that. But I mean, that I think looks considerably better. Still a little bit of red to get off a few little bits. Otherwise, I am really, really happy how that's come out. So now that I've shown you this, on to whatever I filmed in the next segment. And here it is, on the engine stand as promised. Now, I will apologise because my wireless mic has ran out, so I'm going to charge it up overnight, but I'm being impatient. I'm going to do this now, so hopefully you can hear me okay. And my wired one, this one, the OG, has stopped working entirely, so I was going to use this, but again, I apologise. But either way, I'm going to try and detail this out in some nice, clean, easy steps. I'm just basically going to do step 1, do the job. Step 2, do the next job. I'll explain anything you need to know along the way. This is the first time I've done it, but I'm following the Hayes manual. And if everything goes to plan, we'll time this bad boy up. And that's the biggest job, really, that we need to do on this car before we essentially start reassembling. So without further ado, I'm going to drain the oil out of this at some point as well. Let's do the timing bout. I'm just going to move on to step 1. Just one tiny little disclaimer, I'm replacing a crankset as well, so there will be a couple of extra steps in this that you probably won't need to do when you're not doing that, but I might try and separate those off just to stop things being too complicated. Done. Right, step 1, remove your spark plugs. Little top tip, just shine a torch down each of these just to make sure there's nothing sitting down in the holes that's going to fall in there when you actually take the spark plugs out, because these ones obviously are slightly different to the 8 valve. Now, I'm not hugely happy with how these plugs are looking because they have oxidized something terrible. It's like kind of like dusty powder, kind of horrible stuff on there. I'm assuming, or hope, that's going to be like old fuel and just general, like, you know, the metal's been sat around for a long time. Same as inside the actual balls of these spark plug holes as well. So what I've done is, in traditional fashion of bodging something up, got a piece of long pipe like this. I sellotaped it or masking taped it to the end of this. When I put it down, I just tried to suck out any little bits. I mean, at the moment at least, like I said, when you rub these, it just turns into nothing. But I really want that inside the engine. So I'm going to do that a little bit more, make sure I've sucked out all the little bits, and just fingers crossed, when it comes to absolutely sending it, that doesn't come back to bite us at a later date. But I may well get a little telescope in there at some point. But on to step 2. Right. Step 2, you need to remove this bung on this side, and there is one exactly on the other side. It's just an Allen bolt, and this will give you access to put your locking pins in, which are going to lock your cams. And if you need to know, it's an 8mm Allen key. Now, step 3, time to bust out the tools. You need these two first. And you need to screw these into plug socket 1 and 2, or 3 and 4, whichever. Just make sure it's these two next to each other. And the purpose of these 2 pins will come clear a little bit later on, but these are fundamentally going to help you line up the holes in your cam, so when the locking tool goes in, it actually has a hole to go into. But now on to step 4, and if you're not replacing your crank seal, you can skip this section and move forward a little bit further in the video, because this is only relevant if you're removing the crank pulley to replace the sensor. So, you need your crank pulley locking tool and supplied bolts. You need to bolt this tool onto your pulley like this. And we need to rotate the engine so this hole lines up with this hole, and the whole purpose of this is to stop the pulley moving while we undo this bolt. Now don't undo it the whole way, just loosen it off so it is loose enough that you can undo it easily later on. Now very carefully undo the bolt. And it goes without saying, even though this is a very strong engine stand, and I'm sure you'll have one very similar, don't crank on this too hard. Make sure you put your hand on the top of the engine just to support it while you're undoing this bolt, because the last thing you want to do is to break this, snap some bolts and have the engine fall on your feet. That said, all you need to do now is undo these bolts, take this off, and then continue on with the normal steps for doing your timing bout. So now back to these little rods. Step 5 is to crank your engine round slowly until both these rods are exactly the same height. You actually need to get it as close as it can be, so even if you use a metal ruler or a piece of wood or something, just to make sure they are completely level. And we've hit, shall we call it a problem, a discrepancy. So I'm going to spin the camera around. Let's try and figure this out. Now, step 6 is to screw your locking tools in on both sides. Sometimes you might have to give it a little bit of wiggling around just to get it in there because it's a really tight fit. Get them locked up. Now, in the previous step, you would have heard me say that these two rods had to be at the exact same height to make sure the pistons were all level before this cam mark would line up and you'd be able to get your tools in. Now, what are we seeing here, viewers? Correct, it's not right, but it looks really bad. I mean, this actually goes up like really high when the piston's all the way at the top. So we're talking a really small amount. And I'll be honest, as I was bumping this round, to get these level, honestly, this was only off by a tiny little amount. We're talking like, honestly, maybe 5 mil on this spanner. So I really don't think this is very far out at all. Even if it had ran like this, I'm pretty certain it'd have been fine. So either some point or another, while it's in storage, this has been bumped and it's moved it a tooth. Somebody's replaced this bout at some point and just hasn't quite got it level. I don't know, but I'm not concerned at the moment it's done any damage or anything. So we're going to add an additional step to this. We're going to carry on to step 7, I think we're on. We're going to take the bout off. But then what we're going to do, before we put the new bout on, we're actually going to turn this bottom cog. I think it's going to be, I say, about 1 tooth, maybe 2 maximum, just to get this nice and level. So I know then that the cam is locked and the pistons are all in the right place. Then we can carry on with the procedure as normal. We have to take this pulley off anyway to do the crank seal, so we should be fine. Now this step's nice and easy. You just need a 13mm socket to undo this bolt here, and when you do, the tensioner will pull back. Now we've got a new one with the kit, so we'll ditch this completely and we'll put a fresh one on there, even though actually this one looks pretty new. Now, my theory about this having bumped into the wrong timing when somebody replaced the time bout before is looking a little bit more likely because that bout really doesn't look very old at all. So again, still not concerned this had any damage or anything to it as a result of this, but if I'm going to go to all this trouble, I may as well get it perfect. So the next step now is just to turn the crank a tiny little bit, just get these rods exactly where they need to go. And there we go, as level as can be. Now, if you're still struggling to understand the concept of this, I'm going to show you very quickly using these big old pieces of meat. Now really what you're trying to do here is making sure that all 4 of those pistons are all completely in line, because basically if you think of it like this, 2 pistons are always going to be going, say 2 pistons are going up, that means 2 pistons are going down. There's going to be a point where they're just doing this. But there's a sweet spot when they get to about there, when these pistons, if they go down anymore, are obviously going to be lower, and if these ones go up anymore, they're going to be higher, whereas this is where we're trying to get it. So when you put it in 2, you only have to do it in 2 holes, because essentially you're covering the middle ones and the outside ones, and as long as that's going like this, that's your sweet spot. So what you're essentially then doing is your engine, you know that when your cams are in that position, your pistons aren't anywhere near them. They're right smack in the middle. And what that should mean, as long as I know what I'm doing, which I probably don't, is when you actually start your car up, as the pistons are going up and down and the valves are going up and down, at no point should those two meet, because that is bad. So all we've done is given this a little tweak. I was right. I only gave this the tiniest little turn. So it was only a little bit off, but we may as well have done it. So now, on to the next bit. We're going to take the crank pulley off to do the crank sensor. We're going to take the crank pulley off to do the crank seal, and then we're going to unbolt the water pump and do a water pump. So on to step 8. I don't know what step we're on. On to that one. The water pump is dead easy. You just need a 10mm socket, and there are 4 bolts. Done. Now, my suspicions of this engine, having had this time about done previously, before I got the car, is even more apparent now, because this water pump looks like it has never seen coolant in its life, even though it looks pretty rough from the outside, I guess just from being sat. So I'm going to guess that at some point somebody has done the cam bout and time about and stuff on this engine and then sold it, hopefully because they lost interest rather than because they blew something up. But judging by this, it's never had fluid in it. But I'll keep this to one side because it might come in handy one day. Right, step 9, and one that you won't have to do unless you're replacing your crank seal. So we're going to undo this 15mm bolt, take the pulley off, and then we're going to do the seal underneath. You will see a little top tip. I've put a yellow dot there and a yellow dot there, just in case. I'm pretty certain these have like a lock-in key underneath, so you can only go back on one way. But if not, at least now I can line it up, knowing I haven't got it on the wrong way for any reason whatsoever. So I'm going to pull this off now. We're going to grab our new crank seal, and we'll do exactly like we did on the other side. Oh, I made that sound easy, didn't I? Undo the bolt and slide the pulley off. Now these can be really, really tight. Just take your time and don't lose your patience. You'll see the pulley is just up there. So all I did, little top tip, if you haven't got like a special pulling tool that you can screw in and just hammer it back out, all I do is I put a little bit of heat through it, nothing nuts, just get it nice and warm because it's going to help. And I just get like a relatively long, what did I do with it? Screwdriver like this. And like I said, don't be an idiot and start smashing it in there. But as I said, because obviously it's like a little wedge, all I do is I just gently tap it this side, gently tap it this side, gently tap it this side. And eventually, if you've got it warm enough and it's starting to loose, you'll start seeing it just rock very gently backwards and forwards. And then in theory, what you can do is once you've done that a few times, it would have loosened it enough to get some, obviously if you've heated up, be careful, put a glove on there or something and just basically just jaggle it and pull it off. So all I'm going to do now, I'm going to clean up all this area around here, get all this hoovered out and this disgusting enough, wire brush all this out because it's going to look horrible. Same as before, we'll get like a little hook tool or something just to pop this out, and then we'll slide the new one on and we can put that pulley back on the way that it intended. Now it's still hot. I just went to touch it to pick it up. It's still boiling, so we'll wait for a minute. Then we can start reassembling all of this. Now, I really would like to try and get all this cleaned up and painted, so we'll see. We'll see how far we get and how much I can be bothered. Oh man, this side is really fighting me for some reason. I guess it's probably never been off. I had to pretty much destroy this one to get it off. But see if you can spot a problem between my new one and my old one. It's the wrong size. So either there was 2 options on the auto dock and I clicked the wrong one, or they sent me the wrong one. So either way, I'll measure this one. This was like £3, so this is almost certainly going to be off like an 8 valve. No, it's probably the same one. So I have absolutely no idea what this is going to be off of. Unless there's 2 versions of this size for the 8 valves and 16 valves or something. Who knows? But I'll order another one of these. Just means I can't put the other side back together now. Great. I was making good progress as well. I was going to have this back together today. But no. But I say that, what we can do is to put some sealant on and put the new water pump on there, because at least that bit's done. We'll put the new tensioner on just so it's on there as well, to stick the bolt on it. And then just do any other little bits that we can do so when the actual seal turns up, we can put a sprocket back on, put the bolt on, get everything all, make sure it's all lined up. Keep on cracking. Okay, we'll tackle the water pump first. Now, if you're after any recommendations, but even though you didn't ask, I've tried this. This stuff is really good. I'm going to use this for doing the sump as well. I've just found that it seals really, really well. Doesn't make a huge amount of mess, and it wasn't vastly expensive. So yes, top worn-out racing recommendation. And I've seen people go crazy with sealant. The person who did the sump on the engine's done the same thing. People think they have to put loads on. You really do just need the thinnest little layer, because don't forget, once you clamp this on, whatever you've got on there is going to squash out anyway, and it's going to seal that in a treat. So there, just a very thin bit, and just smooth it around with your finger. There you go, this is what I mean. It's a nice smooth layer all the way around the outside. Now obviously if you're doing this on a car that's the engine is still in the actual car itself and you're planning on driving it anytime soon, then you'll obviously have to leave this long enough for it to set before you put any coolant and stuff in it, just to be on the safe side. Now I did forget, I've already put the new tensioner on. I didn't bother showing you. It's one bolt. You just slide it on, and then later on when we put the bolt on, You'll pull it out like this. I've got a special tool for that, but I just remembered something. There was a nice little treat in my timing belt box when I got it, so I didn't expect to get this with it. But it also came with, and it kind of makes sense, I guess, brand new thermostat. So I guess if you're doing the water pump and everything as well, you may as well replace this. So that's sweet. So I'm going to pull the other one off. It's only two, I think, 10mm bolts, and this one comes with its own little gasket. So you don't have to worry about using the sealant for that one. So if anything, it's nice and easy. If you've got the coolant and stuff out of anywhere, there's no reason for me to tell you anything this. Just clean the surface up when you take it off, pop the new one on, and you know then you shouldn't be overheating anytime soon. Although I've been reliably informed, these 16 valves do run a little bit cooler anyway than some of their 8 valve brothers. What is it about me buying cars with no thermostat in it? So somebody's taken the thermostat out of this housing. So either they intended on this going in some crazy race car build or something and didn't think they'd need it, or they lost their minds. So it's a flipping good job I got a new one, because this would have done me no good whatsoever. And done. And it turns out I was a bit of an idiot, or at least I didn't look very hard. And there was actually a seal gasket for the water pump in the bottom of the box. So I actually just took the water pump back off, just cleaned up a little bit, and then put the seal, the gasket on there. It won't hurt there being a little bit of sealant on there as well. It's doubly good. So I've done that. The thermostat's on. I'm going to take the old coil packs off and stuff for in a minute, but I'm actually heading into the house now to put an order in. So as soon as I need to get a new crank seal anyway, I may as well buy a new crank sensor, coolant temperature sensor, and anything else that I can think of that I need to freshen this up. And the plan from this point will be to put the new crank seal on, put the timing belt on properly, take all the locking tools and stuff off, and put all the new spark plugs and stuff in, so that bit's all sealed up. Then I'm going to seal up all the other bits, like tape up all the ports and stuff. Then I'm going to give this a wire attachment on the drill, do that, degrease it, and then hopefully just give it maybe either, if nothing else, it'll be cleaner, just maybe give it a little bit of black paint or something like that on there, and then essentially then the engine can go back together pretty much in its entirety. Now, I will say, I said in the beginning of this episode that I will be doing the engine bay. That has proven, after I've stared at it for a little bit longer, to be, it's going to be a big job. It's going to take a lot of time. I underestimated, I think, a little bit for me to get it good. So I want to do it properly, so I'm not going to rush it. So based on that, I think I'm going to call it quits on this episode for now. I think we've made some really good progress. We've obviously spotted some problems with the engine. We've started properly freshening up everything that would normally cause you problems at a later date. And I'm starting to get a little bit more familiar now with the differences between this 16 valve and the 8 valve one. So I'm going to go see my man AutoDoc on my app, all of the parts, get those in, then we'll get this engine back together even, and then we'll get tackling that engine bay, because as soon as that's painted, the two can become one. Oh, this has been exciting. Hope you enjoyed the episode. It's going to get more and more interesting as we go on. So I'll see you soon. Stay safe.